Welcome back to the Tomb, everyone. This is the Pharaoh, aka Ali, and for today's episode, it's called STEM-ulated, and I have three very important guests with me, and I'll have them go ahead and introduce themselves.
Hello, everybody. My name's Tanya Lewis, and I serve as the Chief Development Operations Officer for Replimune, Inc. Replimune is a biopharmaceutical company, rather a biotechnology company in the greater Boston area that is developing oncolytic immunotherapy to treat oncology indications. And I'm very happy to be here with you today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ronal Pester. I'm currently at Tuskegee University in the Integrative Biological Science program. My background is immunology, in which I began my studies in immunology at City College, New York. And pleasure being here with you guys today.
And my name is Kojo Bonsu. I'm a third-year PhD student at the University of California, Irvine, in the Department of Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering. And my project is primarily dealing with mathematical biology, investigating DNA methylation and how we can use like computational tools and mathematical tools to tell us more about how DNA methylation like regulates our lifetimes over long periods of time.
Thank you all for being here, and then I guess we'll just jump into it. So with the first question, I just wanted to ask, like, how did you guys get into the STEM field?
So I initially got into STEM because I thought I was going to be a physician. And so of course, one of the scientific fields would have been great preparation for medical school. I subsequently decided not to do that, but as we'll get into one of the questions later, it provided a wonderful foundation for me to go ahead and pursue something else.
My story was a little bit different. Well, actually a lot different. I started my education maybe kind of late, and I went into college thinking that I was going to study nursing. And this Jamaican professor told me I should look at the biology curriculum. And then from there, it's kind of like I really didn't know what I was going to do until I applied for a program at Morehouse. The name of it was called EMOTEP. So at the time, I had to do an interview with a panel of about 14 doctors. So I thought all of them were doctors. And so I answered the questions, all the questions that they asked me. And the last question that they asked me was, why do we name our program EMOTEP? So I said, I tried to think of any kind of acronym that EMOTEP could have meant, and I couldn't think of anything. So I was like, well, I have to go and look that up and tell you later. So when I did, I found out who EMOTEP actually was. And that inspired me because he was a great philosopher, the first mathematician, doctor, and all these things. I felt like, somehow I was connected. And that was my inspiration to begin my study of biology. And I never would have dreamed that I would be doing a PhD in biology and studying immunology and SLE, and also obtaining a
Ronald, could you tell people what SLE is?
All right, systemic lupus erythematosus. It's the worst form of lupus, and it mostly affects Black women, which is something that I deeply studied when I was doing my MPH. And so just so happened, I'm doing a molecular study in which I'm looking at the the effects of thymic nerve cells, TNCs, the implants on NZBWF1 lupus-prone mice. And we have seen an improvement in the amount of T regulatory cells that circulate in the bloodstream, which helps control the disease. And we also did some other studies, on kidney inflammation to see if it can prevent proteinuria in the urine and in the kidneys. So, I mean, like I said before, that's how I got into the sciences. I was just inspired to study hard, and a dream that I never had is beginning to come true.
Okay, thank you. Kojo?
Personally, from high school, I guess I was like decent at math enough to where I thought I could like go to college for like something within the STEM field, despite not really having any like initial understanding of what engineering was or what like chemistry or biology really meant like as a profession. I just kind of like dove straight forward and like trying to cut my time with like focusing on a little bit of music and also trying to like balance how I can put science into my life. But ultimately, I was just able to graduate with my undergrad in engineering, and I just wanted to take it as far as I could. So I'm just gonna continue on getting my PhD and just like see how far STEM can take me.
Okay, okay. Um, and that's kind of very interesting, especially with you, Tanya, and Ronald's, that you kind of wanted to go into be either a physician or a nurse, and then with that, it's led into different avenues. So I kind of wanted to ask is that on the road that you've been on in STEMs, like what challenges have you faced as a Black person in STEM?
Ronald, would you like to go first, or Kojo, since I went previously?
Yeah, I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
Challenges that I have had. First of all, is like when I went to City College. Basically, everybody like the security and everybody like that. They thought that I was like the janitor, that I worked. Was a coach. In the athletic department or whatever. Most of the time I was there. So I had a professor that kind of felt the same. She felt that I shouldn't be there because of, I don't know. I mean, she was from, I think, one of those Midwestern countries. And so she made a statement, and I kind of like ignored it. It was kind of racist, but I did bring it to my PI's attention, and I accepted the apology and moved on. So that was quite a challenge because I guess I was used to reacting in a different way. From coming from my background is not like really educational background. More like the blocks I lived on, Brooklyn and uptown. We handle stuff a little differently, but I kind of was able to keep my cool. And so I guess that was a challenge. And then also, since I've been at Tuskegee, I had to have 2 major operations. So that was kind of challenging for me to just come back to school and take exams without being, in class with, the extra class and going over stuff. So that was kind of challenging. Other than that, yeah.
Okay, so it was kind of, so at City College, it was kind of that their perception of you while you were there is that they couldn't fathom that someone that looks like you is in school.
It's like you're an invisible man, It's like you walk down the hallway and like no one sees you, but you still doing your thing, and they can't understand how you can, I guess, perform and do the things that you do without them being the catalyst. basically.
Mm.
Because, I had my mentor was also African American, but he had a lot of juice, he brought a lot of money into the university. So it was like, they just looked at you in a different way, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Part of this family that he kept it kind of close knit, you know what I'm saying? He kept like people of color in his lab, you know what I'm saying? And we would do things just as great as, the white or the Chinese, but, it's a sort of like a resentment. That's one of the reasons why he kind of like was ready to go, because it was like, I guess being a Black in STEM in say City College, or say African American, is sort of different, because when you look at your emails, like you can pronounce your name, like your name is your last name is Davis, right?
Yeah.
But most of the names on the email, it was very difficult to pronounce, and you knew that if you go to a conference, like, of course I'm going to sit with my people of color, so we chilling, and they would ask me, they would say, so what island are you from? I'm like, yo, I was born here. I was born in South Carolina. But they say, what's that, an island? I'm like, no, it's a state in the United States. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, you kind of feel, well, not like out of place, but there's a connection with all of us. There is this connection, and that's what's missing. It's like, we don't understand that we all come from the same people. You see what I'm saying? So we need to promote that in the community. And then I think that, it'll be easier for all of us when we go through these journeys, like through science, careers in science. And I'm pretty sure you don't see that many people that look like you in your profession, but I don't know. I know in mine, for my journey, it has been a lot different, like mostly internationals that I would meet, along my journey.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you, Ronald.
In terms of, honestly, I feel like I resonated with some that he said, where it was like the perception of everybody else upon you. It seems like they feel as if you're not supposed to be there, or you're not supposed to like perform as well as you are. I feel I have had that type of feeling since my undergrad. Even just walking in as a freshman, I noticed like I was the one Black male in my class, so it was just like everybody already looked at me a different way. Nobody really talked to me, of a class of like 90% white, other white kids. So it was just like, I understand that, but then it was just like, as I kept going on inside of like my engineering degree, even if you see international students, a lot of people didn't really know how to interact with me. They made a lot of assumptions about me. A lot of people just didn't think I would be able to perform as well as I did in some ways. And it was just kind of like, at a point I did a lot of the things out of spite. I was just like, I'm able to do this and I'm going to do this. But it was just kind of like, after a while, I noticed that it was just me trying to overperform, or like perform for all of these people, when at the end of the day, the only challenge was the fact that they were uncomfortable with me being there. And that's still how it feels like today, even trying to interact with my grad program. I am like one of very few Black students, so it still falls on deaf ears when I bring up things that primarily affect Black communities, or like even just like other communities of color.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, and I can say that definitely at UMass Amherst, because I don't care, I call people out, is that being in biochemistry, is that dealing with some of the professors, it was subtly hostile. And I think it wasn't until maybe my junior year that I finally had a Black professor. And even when I tried to go reach out to him and just try to pick his brain and try to figure that out, is that it was disheartening, because I kind of got the same vibe from him that I got from other professors. So it's it's hard because sometimes everyone that's your color ain't your kind.
Yeah, it's like you would wish to find community within your peers of colleagues, within other students, or even within other people of color. But then in academia, as you go further up, it just seems it's not as easy to find people who are willing to say, yes, we are a community, we are like here to support each other, versus people who have gotten ingrained and somewhat jaded by the fact that they need to grind hard and like set into a mindset in order to get like progress within their field or within their tenureship.
Yes. And I think that sometimes, especially like you said, when you go higher up in academia, is that um, unfortunately with some of our brothers and sisters is that they don't, especially when they're in white spaces, they know they're Black, but they don't want to appear Black. So when they're interacting with Black students, they don't want to seem like, oh, well, you're having preferential treatment to this. It's like, no, I'm just having a conversation with a Black student. But I feel like times that they go out of their way not to appear that way when it's just simply just, I'm asking you for help. Tanya?
So, before I launch into my challenges, I recognize that I'm the only Black female a part of the podcast, and so that in of itself, right, may say something about why my experience was a little different, right? If we're doing real talk. So, my experience was different, but I was educated in college prep, in a college prep high school in New Orleans that was predominantly white. So when I came to the Northeast to do undergrad at Northeastern in biology, I had already been suited with a coat of armor for how to manage being one of few and sometimes the only that looks like myself. I will say some of the challenges that you described, the three of you have described, I had not experienced. I had a very supportive, nurturing environment in college. In fact, some of my professors took to me. But I would say my challenges in undergrad were probably more self-imposed as a result of not seeing others that looked like me, and also uh, a problem of focus because I was young when I went to undergrad and I was convinced I was going to save the world. So I was focused on everything else but studying. But in terms of, racial challenges, I didn't have really any overt. But I told y'all I did undergrad at Northeastern, and it was a very nurturing community of Black educators that were committed to the success of Black students. And like I said, I had managed to connect with some of my non-Black professors, even though, they weren't, I was Black, one of their Black students. I didn't feel treated differently in any way. But I do recognize that the struggle is real and that my experience is not the vast majority of the experiences. And so I think we all need to commit ourselves to improving and creating a pipeline of Black people in STEM. And really, I think the conversation, I tend to be old school. So the conversation, for me, isn't necessarily about what everybody else can do for us, but really what can we do as Black people sitting in STEM to help our Black communities understand the importance and really begin to drive kids into the pipeline. Because I think there are some resources that in fact do sit there, and we need to make people aware and not afraid to walk through those doors and take advantage of those resources. Sorry, I kind of went off track. Rashante,
No, but I agree with you actually. In a lot of these like avenues, it seems like there are Black educators and communities that are trying to like increase this pipeline of students and actually support new Black scholars into the next generation. But it's just these resources need to be found, or you need to make sure that you have access to them. So it's both important and issue at hand.
Mhm.
Yes, and I definitely agree that because I'm talking about the same stock as like we don't need to stop asking people to help us. We need to help ourselves. And I guess one of the questions would be well, every Black community is not the same, but I'll just kind of as a broad generalizations, like, do you think that STEM is emphasized in Black communities, either in the schools where predominantly Black communities are, or in the family household?
Well, actually, I'm aware that they have programs like STEM programs, like in schools, different schools, but a lot of times, you know, like with my experience going to schools out here in Montgomery, is that they'll have a STEM program, but, you know, it's kind of like, it's not promoted to everyone. So basically, you know, I'll use myself as an example. I could call myself a late bloomer, but maybe not. I was always kind of bright in school, but having like a role model or a mentor who was in science, like somewhat, you know, like how could I be the first scientist that some of these people would ever see when, you know, they come from Alabama, where George Washington Carver, Booker T. Washington, and all these scientists, you know what I'm saying, they have a science program at the school. So how could I be the first scientist that they met? And I just got here in 2016. You understand what I'm saying? So it amazes me that, you know, when people, like you say, they get high up in academia, they don't come back to these schools. You know what I'm saying? They may send some funds and say, okay, we got a science program, but where are the actual scientists? Where are the people who actually work in the field? Why they don't get to meet these people, you know, that wrote these papers in these journals? Why they're not coming back into the community and creating, you know, something besides a program in school? Because, you know, funds are misappropriated, you know. So when you go in the neighborhood, you see no kind of facilities, after school programs promoting science, you know. So I think that, you know, we should, like you were saying, find the resources, but then create programs within these communities so that kids can see at a young age and start learning that, you know, it's possible for them to become, you know, to work in these scientific fields. So
Yeah.
So
And I
I think I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think a critical part, and I've been spending maybe the last 2 years thinking quite a bit about this, as I have 2 teenage daughters in the public school system where we live. I think the critical part that we've walked away from is the responsibility and accountability of the family. And I was happy to hear you ask, is STEM important in families? And I think we've got to figure out a way. I agree with Ron about creating programming in the schools, around the schools, not necessarily funded by the schools. We have lots of organizations that would happily give funding to create programs in communities of color related to STEM. But the thing is, we got to make it more interesting in the streets, right? More interesting than the real life, day-to-day hardcore issues some of the families are dealing with. And I think we got to find a way not to just hit the kids, but hit the value system of the families, right? Because the two greatest influences, right, on kids are going to be their friends and their families. And so I think we have to find a way to work in parallel, to have an impact on both of those institutions that have influence over our kids. And so I think it's really a multifactorial issue that we need to start breaking down into component parts and really trying to attack all of the parts so that we can encircle a kid in understanding that and I think a key part that's missing also, right, is teaching our history. Like Ron, it hits me when you went to the interview and they asked you and you did your research, right? I think it is important for kids to understand if they're not in positions where they think, living lives that they think they might want to live. That's not where our people started, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff that contributes to why you might find yourself here, but it is not where our people started. And so I do think teaching our history, our true history of the impact of genocide and race on our people is an important component. And I also think, like I said, like I started, an equally important component is the values in the home. The reason I am who I am is because of who my mother was. My mother is my mother is a registered nurse, and I grew up in the ghetto, and I made the transition daily from my house in the ghetto to my private, predominantly white institution that did sit in the ghetto, that had an armed security guard and a German Shepherd to make sure we were safe. But I always went back to my community, my family, in which education was important and was seen as a passport, right, to a better life. And so I just think we got to do a better job as community members and family members in trying to impart that value of education and the skills that STEM teach you for and can help build in you in terms of trying to create a better life for yourself. I'm sorry it took so long.
No,
You hit a lot of, honestly, I was like trying to say, I was going to try and interject, but you were hitting a lot of good points because you're right. It is like, like STEM concepts are like teaching like kids at a young age to be interested in STEMs or interested in science as a career. It just never, it was lucky for me that my parents were like, my African parents were like, you're going to be a lawyer, doctor, or an engineer. And I was like, I'll be a lawyer, doctor, or engineer. But it was like, I had that like driving influence on me when I went to my school. It wasn't, it was very close to army bases. It was not very well funded, and it had a lot of its own racist things going on, like a bunch of like small chapters of the KKK, yay Maryland, sending petitions around the school. But it's like I'm still going to this school thinking that I need to go here, get my education, and then do what I need to do to like get myself moving forward. And then once I was able to like do that, once I was able to like give back, I was able to participate in the National Society of Black Engineers, like a program that they had in the SEEK program actually that they had in the city of DC, where they just sent a bunch of undergrads and other postgraduates as interns to just teach kids through ages like third grade to maybe like seventh grade about STEM concepts in the schools. And they were all interested in solar power and fuel cells and physics at like a young age and doing math at a very young age. And I thought that was like a very enriching way to give back to the community and get the kids interested. But then once I continued to age, I personally didn't have any of those programs in my high school. And I know that if I would not have gotten any of those programs unless I went to like a particularly rigorous high school or particularly STEM focused high school. And even in that case, would I personally have been afforded the opportunity? of going, given any other red tape. But it's honestly, I do believe it's keeping it in the family, making sure a family understands that STEM is a way that people can have this upward mobility and have this generational wealth and take care of your family for long periods of time. But then also how we can continue to instill that within like our generalized community and then the academic community and like broader academic communities of color as well. So it's an interesting question. So thank you for going on. Honestly, it had me thinking about all the things that we should really be doing.
And something that both of you talked about was the family and then also the age of when you get exposed to it. And I can say that I am a product of when parents do it correctly, because both my parents taught me about the history of our people, taught me about Imhotep, Lewis Latimer, a lot of George Washington Carver, a lot of prominent Black people here in the Americas and also on the continent. And with having that type of education, is that when I went into school, I didn't have doubt that I could excel, because like I didn't look at math as hard, because I know that my ancestors were the ones that created math. So I know that it was in me, I just needed to pull it out. And then having the influence and the pressure from my parents to excel in these things. And it wasn't pressure like you have to get an A. It was more so, we expect you to get an A because we know that you can do it. And exposing me to a lot of different things. Like one thing is that when I was in high school, I told my dad that I was going to start taking calculus. He bought me like a 2 DVD set tutorial on calculus, and I taught myself calculus before I even took it. So it's reinforcing, like you said, Tanya, the values of like the families and some of the obstacles that you hit along the way, especially if you are going to a predominantly white school. It happened to me in 4th grade. We were supposed to do a book report on inventors. So I went to my teacher and I told her, it's like, oh, I want to do a book report on Black inventors. And then she looked at me and says, like, there are no Black inventors. If I didn't have the support system that I had at home, I would have taken that as gospel and just be like, well, I guess Black people didn't do anything. For those who don't know, my father is a very avid reader. So the next day when I went to school, he almost gave me scoliosis from the amount of books that he gave me to show this white woman. It's like, this is what African people have done. This is what we've invented. So I think it's very important on, I would argue maybe more so on the family part, because before you even go to kindergarten, your parents are there instilling values and things within you. And especially as Black parents, is that you kind of act as a safeguard against the stuff that they are learning at school. Well, against the miseducation that they're getting at school. Because again, almost every day when I'd come back from school, my dad would sit me down and say, like, what did you learn today? And I'd have to tell him what I learned. And then he would tell me, it was like, oh, it's like, okay, that's true. That's not. It's like, this is why this is not true. And he would pretty much call it like de-Europeanizing me. And from that's how I was able to navigate these spaces and not necessarily lose who I am as an African. So I think it's very important I think it really does start at home, because if you don't get that type of confidence at home, the world out there is not going to give it to you for the most part.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think. Oh, you want to go ahead, Ron?
Yeah, one of the problems with that is that now we talking about 2021, 2022. The family is just not the same anymore. It's like you have single parents, single mothers living in the hood, and their values are more, and the kids are being raised by, computers, computer games. Mothers are sending their kids to go play a game as soon as they get from school. So they don't really get that reinforcement that you're talking about. So I believe that, you know, those of us who have had that family background and that nurturing, we have to think of a way to, I guess, come together to build an infrastructure to where we could accommodate some of these kids who come from these single parent homes. So they're not going to get that nurturing that you're talking about. They're not going to learn about who they are, and they're not going to have a chance to build their confidence, because when they go home, they're sent away in front of the television. They buy them all these expensive games. So they go and they play Madden, you know, NBA, 2K or whatever, and all those things. And they are very good at that. You know, like my grandkids, they come and they grab the phone. As soon as you come in, and my little nieces, Uncle Ronnie, can I get your phone? So everybody fighting over the phone. As soon as they get the phone, they go to this little game and watch these little kids running around. Some game that, you know, probably we didn't create, you know. So they're fascinated about the game.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So that's
I
But
believe
Ron,
actually
let
do-
me,
Oh,
go
you want-
ahead.
I
Go ahead.
actually do believe that's an avenue. Like within the last year, I've learned a lot about how this is like a very West Coast thing that they're trying to do, but scientific communication on Instagram, scientific communication through games and YouTube. They're trying to create all of these new types of media for kids to, for particularly kids of color, to be attuned to, so that they can see like a Black scientist in like a toddler's book, or play a game and understand like this was made by a Black creator and this is gonna be able to teach me how to code, or just be able to see videos online of things, of like scientific concepts that even break them down. Just like having a Black face, like breaking it down at like a low grade level will really help kids be under, like, see a Black scientist on their videos that they see, and then also be able to really connect with that on a level. But I believe that's a newer thing that has not been happening too frequently so far.
So I'd like to use what Ron said as a jumping off point to go a little deeper. Now, we've always had as a challenge single parent homes. I don't think that in and of itself, right, is the issue. I do agree that there are issues that people are dealing with that make them, when you're hungry, I'm sorry, you can't focus on learning math, right? So that's why earlier in my comments, I said there are a multitude, it's really multifactorial, and we have to find out how to build a systematic infrastructure, right, that will envelop the child and help with some of this. But I still think, right, because they still idolize their mother in that single parent home, right? And so I still think in order to get the kids to where we want them to be eventually, and the families, if you talk to them, we still got to figure out how to work with that. And Ron, what I would say is, I think we got to stop trying to build systems from our perspective. I think when the kids come and grab your phone, right, or they sit on Madden, right, that's a lot of programming right there. That's stemming in and of itself. So is the question, you know, Tanya, you can play with Uncle Ronnie's phone, but I wonder, that game that you're playing, how did they make that game? Right? Like engaging, just basic, right? So it doesn't always have to be a structured environment. I'm just using the conversation as an example, Ron. I'm not saying you don't do this. Because, you know, when I was in undergrad, I was a science chair for an academic enrichment program for young girls. And so I had to spend time thinking about how to reach them. And the most effective programs for children as well as adults, right, is when you can reach people where they are, right? So versus trying to force them to go sit outside and garden and watch the little thing grow, right, and figure out what are the STEM concepts that they're learning. You know, let's use the things that they are already interested in, right? And that's how we begin to, I think, engage them in different ways, and actually in ways that will compete effectively, I think, with some of the other pools they may have on their attention spans.
And I wanted to kind of connect what you said, Tanya and Kojo, is that, so I agree with meeting people where they are. So coming up with scientific communication programs that use maybe video games or something like that. It's like, I do think that that is good. But I also believe that at some point there are some basic skills that if if we kind of cater to people where they are and not address some of the basic skills, is that it's like, yes, it's good that you can learn from a video game. It's like, but you still need to have the discipline to sit down and read a book. And I think especially with how technology is progressing and the modes of education, is that people want to be educated in short spurts. It's like, I want to sit down, and if it's a 5-minute video, I can sit through it, but they can't sit through a 45-minute lecture. And I think it's something where it's like, we need to instill, I guess, maybe is more so the concept of discipline, to sit down and sit through a 45-minute lecture or spend an hour and a half just strictly reading. And one other thing that I just wanted to touch upon is that as well as the children, and like you said, Tanya, is that it's the parents as well, because with a lot of our history hasn't been taught. So I think it's hard to ask parents to teach something to their children that was never taught to them. So I can't tell you about Imhotep if I don't know about Imhotep myself.
I understand that, but what has gotten our people through is the belief in the sheer will of the generations of the elders, that there is something better for our children, right? So it always started with somebody who didn't know something, but it started with a belief that there was something better. And then how do you think about getting your kids to that's something better? What I'll say is about reading in STEM. Now, I'm a voracious reader. However, I do think the research supports that typically people who are naturally good at STEM aren't naturally good at the language arts, right?
Mhm.
The two kind of don't really travel together. And so in terms of, I do think they're on to something with trying to deliver content. But I think, Ashanti Ali, they can deliver the content, the foundational stuff that they need to eventually be able to do the coding and stuff. They can deliver that in spurts as well, right? It doesn't need to be in necessarily 45 minutes. I think we got to look at how, like Ron said, the world is different. It is very different. Like this whole podcast concept, I was like, oh Lord, let me try and get on early, because I'm not sure I know exactly what to do. And so they're learning in very different ways from the way, even you had to learn. Right now I'm old. So, I sat down and took it was a didactic model, right? And it doesn't have to be that way. And I don't think our educational system is keeping up with, right, the different kinds of ways in which we can stimulate kids to learn, right? I don't know if the model for me was good, having somebody stand up there and lecture for 45 minutes, because that's the way I learned. Like they're moving to using pictures to assemble things. Well, guess what? I can't assemble anything because I'm spatially in, geometry isn't my strong suit, but I can listen to you and interpret. And so I just think we gotta look at educationally some different ways for delivering content. So it's very exciting to hear what Kojo was presenting.
And I agree. I guess my bias is that, first of all, how I grew up, and then also is that going through.
You're your father's son.
I am my father's son.
Discipline is important.
Yes. And I guess growing up that way, but then also going through my MPH, is that my thesis chair, he was very, he was tough with me, but it was the right amount of pressure to get me to the next level. And when I talk about not having the discipline to sit down and read, is like when you're doing a thesis or a dissertation, the amount of reading that you just have to sit down and go through the articles and everything like that. And it's like, that's something that can't be streamlined. So I guess when I'm talking about it, I'm talking from a standpoint where I'm expecting these children to end up getting their master's or their PhD. And those are the types of things that I would want them to learn, so that when they get there, it's just, they look at it as like, oh, like I can already do this.
But you didn't start there, right? It's an evolution. So what this conversation is really about is that the pipeline isn't there. So we can't start there with scaring them that you're gonna have to read, 20 page, 5 20-page articles in a night, right? We can't start there.
It's kind of embarrassing, but I didn't even read my first scientific article until like the age of 22. I was like, it's like, I never sat down and was like, this is a scientific paper, I should open it up because I'm interested in science. It was just like, the medium never came, but you can still do it.
And I hear what you're saying, Ashante, and I think the conversation has to be about preparation, right? Because of course, the ultimate goal in creating a pipeline for Black STEM professionals, right, is right through higher education, right, and PhD. So there'll be steps along the way where you need to prepare them, right? But I think right now, all these kids, irrespective of race, are into is gaming and music, and that's coding, right? It's like, I think we got to stop like trying to make it so complex, because I don't think it really is. And I think to the extent we can unpack it and break it down for them, and they see, right, if somebody likes building, right, just, I think there are games that can teach them those things, and we just got to think about having a conversation a little differently, just and by conversation, I mean just asking a question, open the conversation, right, for their little minds to wonder how their game works. Sometimes it's just about planting a seed for a kid, and then they'll run with it. I don't know, Ron, you have some little kids around you. Do you see that in your experience?
Well, I kind of see, I try to encourage them, like you say, like I would tell them, like, think about who invented the game, things like that, or you can invent a game like that yourself, so other kids can look at, things like that. But I don't know. I'm thinking on the level of maybe writing books, because we write books, right? And we write the books, we're gonna talk about, and that's gonna probably help kids to see better, people, children of color, to see that we're writing books, and we are kind of like encourage them through seeing Black authors and seeing Black characters in the books. I mean, that's the way.
I do think that's important imagery, right? If you can see it, you can believe it. I mean, I was committed to having my girls see the images. So those little expensive American Girl dolls, I made sure they did have them, because they created girls, dolls that looked like them. So when they would walk into any environment, they would understand that, hey, it's not a question about whether I belong. It's a question about how I can help you, right, with my presence. And so I think we got to give some real thought to how do we take these kids and we armor them, right, against some of these things that are really beginning to revisit us in the world, and maybe they never went away. I don't know, in terms of, these racial incidents and things like that. Maybe they never went away. I don't know. Um, but I just think we got to take those opportunities where the kids find joy and translate those into educational opportunities.
Yes, I definitely agree with you because I'm not against using video games and things like that, because before I went into my MPH, there was a mobile game that I play on my phone all the time. It's called Plague Inc., which pretty much you play as, like, you construct a virus or bacteria or whatever, you create a disease, and then the point of it is to try to spread it to the rest of the world. So it's like you could increase the infectivity. Yeah, okay. The game did not age well.
It was cool back then.
But I will say now that because of the pandemic, I went back and played it. They did add a version to it where you're supposed to stop the spread of a disease. So it's good. But that exposed me to certain public health concepts, so that when I went and got my MPH, it was just like, oh, it's like, yeah, I know about infectivity and like how if it mutates, like there's a balance between infectivity and lethality. And if you're too lethal, then you can't spread as fast. So it's those types of things that I understand that it has a use for it. But I agree with what you said, Tanya, said is about the preparation, because I was prepped throughout my years growing up, that when I came across that game, I saw it as fun, but I also saw it as something that I can learn from.
Your parents, knowing them right, were prepping you for eventual greatness. They recognized it was a journey, right? And you're still, I think you're pretty awesome myself right now. But you're still pursuing some academic pursuits, and so and I think we got to return to some of the old school stuff, like the Saturday program. My mother kept me wrapped up in, every summer I was in somebody's program somewhere learning something. When I told y'all I was in the college prep high school that summer before, she's like, look, I don't know if you're ready for the math program. I'm putting you in summer school, right? So that you can be prepared to deal with the math that you're going to, be hit with. I will say I had a very special mom. I have a very special mom. And so I think we got to figure out how to bring some of these old school things back for the kids, and add some of the new school things, like you have a Saturday academic enrichment program, but you got a gaming chair. Where, it's not about just sitting learning math. We're going to jump into learning math. Now, it's very hard for my mind to learn things. So I hear what you're saying, Ashanti Ali, without first having somebody stand up there before me and teach me the foundational things. Mm-hmm. But I watch kids and they learn very differently, right? So, Saturday academic program, we're going to build us a game. You want to play that game?
I really want that to come back, almost as like it's like the concept of a community now, like feeding the children instead of just like only parents having to instill all the pressure. Now, if you live within if you have like a community around, you can just say, oh, on Saturday, all the parents tell your children to come down to the park. We're going to do like some sort of educational thing for them to like learn a new STEM concept, or maybe we're all just going to play games together so that they can learn about how this game works and how these all the kids can interact with it, and then interact with it both with an educational like aspect in mind, but also with the knowledge that they're just going there to have fun within their community and with their friends. So even going back to what Ron said, because I guess I personally came from a single parent home. I lost my father like later in life, but it was like before he left, he instilled all of these values in me to be like, this is what you need to do if you want to like continue on in your life. And I was like, yeah. So if I was able to spread that amongst the community and then actually have somebody else come and help my mother out while like she was raising me, I feel like these are the types of enrichment and like educational activities that historically would have been given by the church, like Sunday school type activities. But for STEM, it would be very helpful to have it like as more like just general community activities. So it's not only, well, to keep Sunday is Sunday.
Yes. And Ron, would you want to speak about the impact that these programs can have? Because I know that when you're in New York, you did programs like that where you kind of used basketball to get the kids, but once you got them, then it was an avenue to.
Well, it's like Tanya was saying, it's kind of old school, and we need to bring that back, like a community concept, because now, the changes that the churches, they're not even supportive of everyone in the community. They have become such a business orientated that, the love is not there anymore. You know what I'm saying? So to keep the community of any family together, it's got to be love. You know what I'm saying? You have to teach these kids that love is more important than just the pair of J's that you're gonna get. You know what I'm saying? Or the monetary, because everybody have assimilated into this American, becomes so Americanized. It's more about money and how you can get money and how fast you can get the money. And, that's what our neighborhoods have become. They've become neighborhoods where people are more concerned with I than we. You know what I'm saying? So if we come together, we is always stronger than I. So these kids are learning these type of concepts like, yo, I got this and you don't got this, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, I'll rob you for that because I want it, you know what I'm saying? Instead of we working together so we all can have. So I think that, bringing the communities back together and having events to where we can, but first, like you say, we need infrastructure, because if we go and stand on the corner every day, and we preaching, it's like preaching on the corner. You know what I'm saying? So the kids don't see anything, no progress. So we have to go in with some type of resources so that their minds, we can gravitate, they could come, and feel like they get some kind of benefit out of it, even for the kids and the parents.
Now I'm gonna get this to you young people, because I'm working with not as much capacity as I used to have. But all the urban communities have programs with I'll call it building reclamation, right? These buildings that have been abandoned and not used, or lots, right? You get the city to give you one of those buildings, right? You get donations from corporations to fix it up. And then you also get donations to feed the kids. Because I am of a culture that when you're trying to solve a problem, you're breaking bread. And so I think we just have to, think creatively in those ways and see opportunity in everything that is in our community, because it will need to be in the community to attract the kids. We can't put it across town. We got to put it in the community, because then that makes it easier for parents to interact and to get them there, and for the kids to, get themselves there. And we start teaching them responsibility and things of that nature. But there's probably grant funding available. You probably don't even have to spend time trying to write a grant for that. You probably just go knock on the door at City Hall and say, listen, we want this building right here to do some community programming. And then the other thing is, hold the churches responsible. I hear you, Ron, on that. It all begins with love, and we just got to hold them accountable and say, listen, we need some space to do this activity with these kids. And we need your church members to feed us. So y'all cook for us and we make sure the kids have, a meal while you're trying to impart, right? Because it's a multifactorial issue for sure in our communities, but we've always solved our own problems. And I don't know how we got away from that. And I think it's time for us to return to that. We have to have some agency and discipline and self-control. And money moves things. Money changes trajectories for sure. But I guess what I'm saying is it's not all about money, like you're saying, Ron, right? It's not all about money. And so let's think creatively how we can do some things with some of the things we already have in our communities to begin to change the trajectory for kids.
Money will come later. I think money,
Always does. Look at me.
Right?
And so I kind of wanted to ask about that. So in your opinions, like how can Black people in STEM do a better job of translating their research into meaningful impact on their communities from an academic and also from an industry standpoint?
So I think there are various ways you can do it. I'm always surprised, I don't know why, by this whole technology stuff. Like you just decided you're going to do some podcasts, right? And, like this whole concept of TED Talks, right? So I think to get the word out, it seems the best way to do that with most people, not even just young people these days. I have a challenge accessing it, but most of the world does not. And that's through social media, right? Even if you go to some of the company websites, because COVID has forced us to think very differently, right? They're doing a podcast type model that they link from the company websites and stuff like that. So I think that's one non-traditional, maybe it's becoming traditional, certainly accepted way of doing things. And then I think you have the traditional ways, lobbying in academic institutions. Kojo, where did you say you were in school?
The University of California, Irvine, Southern California.
Mm-hmm. And so, dealing for Kojo, right, dealing with his academic faculty in his program, but I would recommend that you think about outside of your program as well, and what are the collaborations that you could have with other departments that might be more receptive to some of the things it is you're talking about. Like everybody is coming up with DEI offices in universities, right?
Yeah.
Where they have the cultural centers on campuses, and some of those cultural centers actually have research budgets, tied to them. So I think it has always been the case that in some cases, right, for us, we can do the traditional paths. We certainly can, but I think there's some non-traditional ways that are presenting themselves that we just have to think a little more creatively, innovatively, which STEM has trained all of y'all to do. More.
I'm still in training.
Right. And that's okay. And that's okay. And if you do this, if you achieve this, then that's all right. You're gonna have ended your training. I'm gonna say you made it, you did it. And so I think you got to use some of these critical reasoning and analytical skills that you're learning as a part of the STEM fields, right? To apply to solving, I think, some of the funding problems that you're talking about. Chantel, the money's out there, right? And I know we hear that all the time.
Yes.
Right. And then you can't have no shame, right? it's the Temptations, ain't too proud to beg.
Yes, yes.
Right. You can't have no shame. If you believe, you got to believe, right? You can't expect anybody else to believe more in your ideas than you believe in them yourself, right? And so you just got to suit up and pursue funding, and just don't take no for an answer.
Yes, and I
And
think that just kind of with my experience at Tuskegee is that they have done things where they essentially use the intellectual capital that they have there with the university being there, and then bringing that to the community around. But with some people that I've spoken to, it has seemed that they use money as as a way to not do something. So it's, oh, well, we don't have funding for this, so we're not going to do it, versus having the tenacity to just like, fine, even if we don't have money, we're going to find a way to renovate these buildings, because the living conditions of what the students are living in is subpar. And that was kind of the mentality that Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver had, especially George Washington Carver, because anything that he found in his lab, as soon as he found it out, he brought it to the farmers and said, hey, I just figured this out. Here's a better way of doing X, Y, and Z. So I think that especially for us in academia, is that we need to not just conduct research, publish, and then move on to the next thing, and not have a infrastructure or mechanism set in place so that what I just found out, what I just concluded, can actually go out and help the people on which I gathered the information from. Because a lot of times, especially I think in academia, we go out, we ask people to conduct research, and then once we get the research published, they never hear from us again until we want to do more research.
I think you're describing an ethical responsibility of those who do research to the people who participate in their research. And I think that's a real thing, but I do think that, you can ask people for things, and if they keep telling you no, it seems to me that if you really want that thing, like better housing, on campus, all the brilliant minds can come together, the people in the architecture school, the folks in the engineering school, and the folks who know how to build things, can come together and say, okay, we understand we don't have money, but we're willing to donate our time to create designs for the building, and then our people power to actually then implement it. You see what I'm saying? I'm just at the age in my life now, y'all, that I'm tired of seeing people throw up their hands, right? I mean it when I say you can't have nobody, it's not gonna work if you want everybody else to believe more in what you're doing than you believe yourself, right? And I just think that we got to get back to some of those more traditional ways of getting it done for ourselves and for our communities.
And then, I mean, with that being said, we always had, and this one of the problems I think that has persisted over the years. You have these people in academia that get these certain positions, and they have that I mentality, and they are selfish. So they stole a lot of money, that was donated to, for these people to have these repairs and things done. So it's like students, like just think about a month ago, from the band, Tuskegee band, they protested. They wrote a letter to the president. They refused to play in homecoming. They wasn't going to play in the Turkey Day Classic And they said, okay, we're going to demand that, you know, better equipment. You know, we go on trips, we don't get fed. They don't want to feed us. They got to borrow money from their colleagues to eat, you know, and things like that. Okay, when, you know, administration have to do better at, you know, hiring people with integrity, people that's not going to steal from the kids, you know what I'm saying? So we got to have people, like I say, again, we come back to that concept of love. We got to care more about the people, you know, and the youth. They see that, you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, if you're being taught to be selfish, you know, and not to reach back, not to go back into your community, because something is bad about that. So I think that we've gotten away from reaching back, and that's why we had all these programs. We was able to benefit from these programs in our neighborhoods back in the days when we were coming up, because we had community centers. Most of the community centers now are closed. You know, a lot of the schools in the inner city, they don't have band, they don't have sports. They took that out like years ago. So generations of kids have been raised without these accommodations. So the street seems more attractive, you know, because they see their siblings, you know, do the street thing and hustle and get money, and, you know, and it's kind of, you know, different in the Black neighborhoods than it is, like, say, in like a suburban, growing up in a suburban area, because the role models are not us scientists or us people who work in an industry. They see more of, you know, murders, drive-bys, and brothers standing on the corner with the gold chains, and I mean, not like back in the days, but still, they still, you know, flashing. And that's the life that a lot of these kids want to have when they grow up. So I guess we have to, like you say, build these places in Black communities so that they can have a different avenue, something else to attract them.
And then I'm gonna say something that people might think is really crazy. And then when I say work with people in the community, I mean bring the ballers to the table as well, right? Because they know what they have to survive to be able to ball. You understand what I'm saying? So we bring them to the table. If they got money, they can fund. They can fund, and they can say, we can say, hey, you know what you got to do to survive day to day. You don't want your little brother to have to live like that. And if you don't want your little brother to have to live like that, then help us, right? Help us to do something better, right? I'm serious. I'm serious about this. You got to attack it on all levels, and everybody can be a part of it, right? I don't think anybody has to be left out, really.
The only way is with everybody.
Yeah.
It's true. And you know what, these kids, let me tell y'all something. We just got to hold people accountable. We wouldn't have no problem getting out there protesting, telling the university to fire somebody white. If the people have stolen the money from the kids, they need to be fired. That's what the request from the kids should be, right? I'm calling them kids, from the young people should be on the campuses, but full stop, right? What the young people say, period. Right? That's what the request should be. You need to get on up out of here, right? Because if somebody come back here and give us some more money, you know, you're going to do that again, right? What the great Maya Angelou said, may she rest in peace, Dr. Maya Angelou said, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. Mm-hmm. Right? So you ain't got no place here. You know, now you can do penance and you may be able to make a comeback, because you know we're very forgiving people. But you're not going to make that comeback this year and in this position. You need to go stand aside. You know, and how dare anybody would take advantage of resources that have been given for kids and misuse them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think I touched upon it in another episode when I did about HBCUs and PWIs, but there seems to be sometimes a sense of culture where it's a double-edged sword. It's like, yes, here at HBCU we're a family, but everyone knows that if your sibling does something wrong or does something wrong to you, you will try to get justice, or like you will hold that person accountable. The thing that I've noticed is that there have been some people that have worked there for maybe 40 years and been only doing their job for 15. But because of the culture of, oh, we're a family, it's that you're not willing to fire, get rid of that person, that ultimately is hurting and a detriment to the environment of the institution. Because I can guarantee you at some of these PWIs, if you have enough complaints against you, especially in the financial aid office, they're going to start looking into what are you doing and have a review. So I think that it's like you said, Tanya, is that regardless of who the person is, what they look like, it's about accountability. So you might be so-and-so of the president of this sorority fraternity and you have so many connections, but if you are systematically ignoring the grievances of the students, then you have to go. So I guess we can kind of transition a little bit to something, it's not going to be lighter, but transition to something else.
Light.
Especially so with being in STEM and for the past 2 years dealing with this pandemic and seeing how they've characterized it as, oh, like especially with the vaccine, it's like, oh, Black people don't trust the vaccine, don't trust science. Well, they say science or pharmaceutical companies. I guess I'll ask, well, everyone, is that how can these institutions build trustworthiness with Black communities? And I say trustworthiness and not trust, because trust is something that you give, where trustworthiness is something that you've earned.
You preaching today. I'm gonna have to think a little bit on that. Listen, this is the real deal, right? I'm in the industry. So what I want us to not do is to allow anything to prevent us from getting access to the things that would make us have better lives. Okay. You know, it is very disheartening to me being in the biotechnology and industry, the biopharmaceutical industry, whatever term you want to use, and not have people who look like us participate in clinical trials. It is the way in which you get access to the very best of technologies that are available, right? Now, it's a personal choice. You don't have to do it, but it's a way to get access. I do think that, you know, there are some historical things, right, that happened. But we're moving away from a time where the generations that actually experienced those things are actually the people who were, you know, having to deal with some of the diseases that really there are cutting edge therapies being developed that we refuse to access. I just don't understand that. I really don't. I must say, I don't understand it. I think it's a two-way street. I think we have to go, we as an industry have to partner with organizations that have access to the Black community, right? To try and educate them around the scientific advances that are out there that they could have access to if they're willing to participate. and I do think things are different from the historical things that have happened. The industry is different. The federal government is different, because people forget the biggest things have been the collusion, right, have been the federal government on the wrong side of the issue. And so, I think at some point, we're gonna have to just look at it and say, here go my STEM skills. What's the probability, right, that I'm going to experience something negative versus something that could be life-saving for me or my child? We're gonna have to let go of some of this. We're gonna have to at some point wipe the canvas clean and come to the table with an open mind. That's how I feel about it.
I actually believe that you're 100% correct. I just know that is an uphill battle, given I guess I'm from Baltimore, or from the Baltimore area, so Johns Hopkins in there. They don't really have a great name around here, but it's like you see that they literally built themselves off the back of an entire city, and why this whole city does not want to trust any medical advance that comes out of there. But we do need to wipe the slate clean, because we need to move forward as a people. We need to be able to take on these medical advances. We need to know what these cutting edge technologies that other people are using, so that we can also improve our livelihoods.
And something that I wanted to respond to what you said, Aunt Tanya, is that, to give you a perspective as to why some people don't end up getting into these clinical trials. And this is just from doing different groups, focus groups, talking to people, is that part of the reason is linked to the healthcare system. Because if I believe that I'm going to be pretty much a guinea pig and something happens to me, this is their words. They was they're just going to experiment on me. I'm just like a guinea pig. It's if something happens, I don't have any assurances that I will get access to the care that I need. So it's
it's an informed consent, Chantelli.
No,
it's an exchange. It's an exchange of services.
Yes, and I understand that, but I'm saying it's that's what some people don't understand, is that yes, there's an informed consent, and during the duration of the experiments, if something happens, they'll make sure that you will get treatment.
Not just during the duration of Chantelli, and I think this is important, right?
Okay.
If your disability is going to last, right? If you're hurt and your disability is going to last beyond the duration, I don't know any of my colleagues in industry that would not say that we're on the hook for making sure you have care for that. I just don't, and I've been in this for, almost 25 years now, and doing this. And that's why I do think a part of it has to be about, so it's just not education. A part of it is going to have to be about us wiping the slate clean and being able to walk together, make some agreements, and walk together in the future, knowing that, we're going to behave differently. There are accountability structures in place that just don't allow some of the things to happen that have happened in the past, even at Johns Hopkins.
And then the other thing, and this is more so what I've seen from the academic side of it, and the more ethical, problematic of it, is that when you do have people from lower income communities participating in, let's say HIV research, and they're trying to find a new treatment for better treatment for HIV research, the people will have access to that as long as they're being studied. But then once they are no longer in the study is concluded and everything like that, they still have HIV. Now, once it hits the market, they might not necessarily have the resources to access the same drug that they were able to get for free, because like, and the only premise was is that you were in a study, but now since you're not, now it becomes a monetary thing. And I think that's where kind of the ethical part comes into, is that if we're studying you, like, you will get access to this. But if you're not studying, if we're not studying you anymore, then you're up to your own devices to figure out how to get the thing that you help bring to market.
So I think there are expanded
sorry.
access programs that, no, I think it's important for us to have this conversation, and since I'm on the other side,
Mhm.
right, to really just provide some facts,
Yes.
right? There again, you know, there are programs in place for people who are uninsured. Most, if you look at most of the ads, they'll say if you're not able to get your medicine, call this number, right? That's the pharma industry putting money in, saying, listen, we are standing up. We do believe that that is the case. Now that's on the pharma side. Now, the underinsured in America, we can't just say attribute it to a pharma issue,
Mhm.
right? That's not really a pharma issue, but there is a pharma does provide access and payment for the kinds of issues. I don't know of a pharmaceutical company who's taken a drug to market who does not put kinds of programs in place. Of course, there's eligibility, right? We may not be able to hit, industry may not be able to hit everybody, but there is help there. And the reason the piece that was forgotten is that your HIV was treated. And without treatment, there's a high probability you would have been dead,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But because you were in this clinical trial, it kicked down the disease enough for you to still be here and maybe even survive without further treatment. I don't know. But I just think, go ahead.
I was about to just like say like the issue getting confounds because there is like a problem in our country with like people getting access to just general healthcare that they would generally need. So it's like if I was to put my like health at risk for a clinical trial, be the clinical trial be as well like made as possible, me like trying to be as like giving as possible to like the clinical trial, I still could have that fear that I'm not going to be able to get treatment after just because of American healthcare and how I would need to get it. So that I
Yeah,
do that is still like a interesting hump. Yeah,
yeah.
it honestly is still
I
like
hear you,
a
Kojo.
barrier.
I think it's a good point. But again, I would say you're getting access to healthcare while you're in the clinical trial, and likely cutting edge, because where most of the trials are performed are in academic research centers, right? Not in the community. You know, they'll refer patients into the clinical trial. It's at the end of the day, it's a very personal decision, and I know it's emotionally charged, but all of my loved ones, you know, we have lots of people. So the bulk of my experience is in cancer research. And so, you know, I'm usually looking at clinical trials as an option for my loved ones, because really you can get access to some cutting edge stuff. And it has really worn on me being a Black woman in industry at such a high level that we've not been able to crack this nut and really drive Black people to clinical trials where they could have access to really some cutting edge therapies, you know, and just really life altering. You know, if you look at you got to run it, right? Just look at the data. What's the likelihood? You know, life is not zero risk. So I'm not saying there's not risk associated with clinical trials, but what's the real risk? The one patient out of you want to focus on perhaps, and I've been in this conversation with people I
Mhm,
love.
mhm.
I'm like, you want to focus on, let's even say 5 patients out of the 5,000 that's been treated. And okay, that's fine. That's your personal decision to do that. But I do think, how do we change that? I think we
Yeah,
partner.
that's the
We can't bring it directly from industry to the community. I think we got to partner with organizations in the community, that have in the community that have presence, to be able to try and make some forward motion.
And I think that with me being in like public health ethics and things like that, is that with those 5 people is, well, first of all, I think everyone thinks they're that special 5 people. So meeting the people where they are that's where I talk about assurances, is that, okay, yes, it is a low probability that you will have an adverse reaction, but in the event that you do, here are the things that we are assuring you so that you feel more comfortable to make that decision. And I guess that's the kind of thing that I'm trying to wrestle with and get to, is that what are the assurances during the study, and then potentially maybe years down the line, because there are times that I'll be watching TV and you'll hear that commercial. It's like, oh, if you've taken this medication in the past 10 years, you're entitled to X, Y, and Z. And then
Yeah.
that's where people are now looking at it. It's just like, wow, it's like, this might not even be an immediate thing that will happen to me. It's like,
It's true.
So
down
like
the
10
line.
10 years down the
It's
line,
true.
because I participated in
true.
something, I now have whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
It's even like,
it's absolutely
that's,
true. But what I would say is, Ashante, with your public health background, look at the drugs that in the ads that that come up like that, and how old they are. 1 and 2, right? Look at the level of data, the level of evidence. Right, here we go. I'm wrapping it up in STEM.
yeah.
Right, and really, really evaluate it, right? Because a snippet, right, from a personal injury lawyer in a commercial might not be the thing that should be driving your decision making. And I'm not trying to minimize what our communities feel, because I understand firsthand, because I have people in my family who feel like this. And I've had some pretty tough conversations about the COVID vaccines as well, right? Right up and about now. So I do understand it. But I think it's our responsibility as people who are trained in these rigorous ways of evaluating data to really help, demystify the data, if you will, and, make it plain and simple. I tell my teams that all the time. I'm sitting in the meeting, I'm like, listen, I'm the simplest one sitting here. But I need you to break that down for me, right? I want to be able to understand what you're saying and what this piece of data means. And so I do think I like your idea about, what are the assurances. I think it's wrapped up in informed consent form, but those documents are complex, right? They're probably not as simple as they could be. But I think you could do an exercise. You could probably do something for school. Something for school in which you look at it and you pull out what are the things that are already embedded in there that would get us to that, and what are some of the maybe some additional things that might be needed, right? Because there might be gaps. There might very well be gaps. But I think the important thing, right, is what we're doing now. Let's sit down and have a conversation, right? Let's just talk about it. Everybody, I'm not gonna yell at my grandma for sounding crazy. I'm a scientist, right? I'm not going to yell at her. I'm going to just understand her perspective and where she's coming from, right? And then I think, the other side has to, try to be not emotional and listen in a, unimpassioned way, dispassionate way. to those of us who may be able to break it down.
Yes. And okay, and these are the last two questions because I think I've held you guys here a long time. Being in STEM and having the information, but then also having the historical context, and I call it the historical trauma of what has been done to us by these industries. How have you reconciled with that, and how have you overcome that to continue in STEM?
I got yeah, I got this. Oh God, yeah. I'm a chemical engineer. The oil industry has done terrible things to many different parts of this country, have made so many parts of like our own communities so unlivable. But I personally am just like, I want to take all of these skills that they're trying to put on, like be put for all of these monetary purposes, and actually put something sustainable in the ground, actually take it back to Ghana and actually build factories or build things that will not be like that won't be polluting the air, like won't be polluting the ecosystem that's there. Actually be able to like take a water mitigation system that I came up with and like put it in all of these areas that have harm. It's like take the education that I have and like recognize that I've seen all the bad stuff that my field has tried to do and just push it in the other direction, because it's just not we just can't keep going like this. The world is burning, and it's like not my fault, but
You're interesting.
You'll be part of the problem if you don't use your skills to solve it.
exactly.
Right.
I could be
And
pouring
so I
oil
like
into the
that.
I could be
like
pouring
that.
oil. I could have been pouring oil into the Gulf within last year, but no, I am pushing myself in the exact opposite direction.
And one other piece I think, Kojo, is, and I think governments are starting to do this, hold those companies responsible for creating some of that change, right, in the right direction, right?
They are.
Mhm.
So that provides me an avenue for employment, but primarily I see as like I've seen the area around my house just become worse and worse just due to pollution. I'm like, no, we need to literally go in the other direction. We just can't have it like this.
Mhm. Well,
Ron?
that sounds awesome.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I'm a praying woman. I'm not crossing no
Well,
fingers.
pray
I
for
will
me,
say-
please.
I will say a prayer for you, Kojo.
Thank you.
Definitely.
And I must say, I am very proud of you. I'm very proud of all of y'all.
Thank
Because
you.
in your own ways, in your very own unique ways, you're standing up and really trying to make a difference. And it sounds like really have already had a positive impact in the places where you stand. So I want to make sure before we end, I say thank you for that and how very proud I am of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna keep going.
Ronald, did you want to, or Tanya, did you want to talk about how, well, especially with you being in the pharmaceutical company and like wrestling with being, knowing what they've done, well, what some companies have done to Black people and the historical trauma of it, and then reconciling like working within it as well.
Ashante and Lee, I've talked a lot, so I don't know if Ron has something to say, and I can go after him. Is that okay?
Yes.
Well, I mean, me having, the opportunity to study systemic lupus erythematosus, which is a disease that affects mostly Black women, that have, kind of kept me, interested in studying sciences, and then also being affiliated with Dr. Clayton Yates in his lab, studying cervical cancer in Black women, and also prostate cancer in Black men, and discovering that, there's a different gene that's involved, which causes the cancer to be more aggressive in Blacks than that's in whites. So when you talk about like clinical studies, I mean, him and Dr. James, they have actually has a publication on this Kojo gene and the peptide that binds to it that stops the progression of this type of cancer. So he's just published in Nature, the Journal of Nature and Medicine, about this particular peptide. So things like that, and understanding that we need more people of color studying these diseases so that we can bring these cures and bring, you know, more Black people into these clinical studies. But with the understanding that, you know, we all have a little difference in our DNA, right? So we need more samples from like African Americans, because now we're using samples from, I think it gets the samples from somewhere in Africa. I don't know which country, but they get samples, and that's how we kind of like do our experimental studies. That's how this gene was able to be found, that there was a different sequence in this developing this cancer. So again, I say, you know, things like discoveries like that that's done at Tuskegee, and I just, you know, feel honored to have the opportunity to study at a HBCU as great as Tuskegee. That kind of keeps me motivated.
Thank you, Ronald.
That's beautiful. I ain't even had to get on my clinical trial platform. There it is. He summed it up. Why Black people need to participate, right?
Yeah.
But how have I reconciled history, right? I mean, it's a larger, right? How have I reconciled living as a Black woman in America, given the historical context of America? What I believe in the future, right? I believe that people don't have to be what they once were. I believe people can be better. I really do. And how I've reconciled myself with being in industry and being a practicing Catholic is that this is my relationship with my God, right? And I believe that he's blessed me with a brain to think and a brain to solve problems, right? And this industry actually allows me to do that. It allows me to help in a way that I hadn't imagined that I would be doing it. When we opened, I told you I thought I would be doing direct patient care as a physician, and actually having a degree in biology and being trained educationally in Boston, right, one of the global hubs of biotech, you know, has made me able to help in ways that I just didn't think possible. And that brings me a great deal of satisfaction, even if other people can't see it or understand it just yet.
Thank you. Thank you. And I guess I just kind of wanted to say this, like, for me, being in public health is how I've tried to reconcile it, is that I guess because being in public health and knowing the things that these industries have done is that kind of some people have looked at me and it's like, oh, well, you're part of them. And what kind of kept me sane and kept me going is that I realized that when I'm looking at these statistics, when I'm looking at the data, is that yes, I see numbers, but I also see like my sister, I see my mother, I see my aunt, my cousins, like, and I use that, the connectiveness of it, because a lot of people, I'll say this, is that with people of other races, they study public health, but as Black people, we experience public health, because with a lot of the indices that you look at us is that we are the ones that are suffering the most from these things. So I guess looking at it through the lens of a Black person in public health and not being in public health as a Black person has kind of helped me reconcile the two of them. Last question, then we'll just get to different plugs that you guys might have going on. So for Black students, and then also for Black parents, what would be the kind of overarching advice that you would give to them? So students that might be going into STEM, whether it be nursing, the biology, chemical engineering, and then for parents that want to try to inspire interest in STEM in their children. Either one, you guys can.
I would say internships. I would encourage them to apply for internships and to do some type of research while they are, in their studies, undergraduate studies, or even in high school, get involved in some type of, if you're interested, what I'm saying, in any type of science, because everybody is not going to be a scientist. Everybody's not going to go into, industry. I mean, I think the most important thing that we can do is and give them different avenues, because someone might want to be engineers. Like I'm a biologist, she's in industry. You know what I'm saying? We all have different paths, chemical engineering, so, we have to show them how broad science is. It's not just what I do, you know what I'm saying? There's so many other different things that you can do in science that so far and beyond. It's like when I go to a conference, it's like, I don't know half the stuff like some of the people are presenting, because it's not my field, but it's so many different, fields in science that they may be attracted to. So the main thing is bringing that to their attention and give them the opportunity to, experience and see that these many different avenues they could take in science. So exposure, to different things that are different careers in science.
Thank you, Ron.
Honestly, I guess for both ways, for both the parents and the students, I would just say for the students, apply. If you're even slightly doubting that you'll be able to get any sort of position, or that you feel you're not smart enough to do the next thing that you're thinking about, just apply. And even if you don't stack up as high as you think you should, you will have learned so much and gotten so much better just by going through that application. And then for parents, to anybody trying to get their kids involved in STEM, if you see that your kid is interested in that's something that's logical or mathematic, if they like things that have a lot of shapes and sizes to them, or if they find themselves really trying to look at the numbers and trying to interact with any math in their own lives, just apply them to that, open their minds to anything that you see them doing, and then try to just inspire them to look closer at the things that they have.
Thank you.
So I would say three things. Ron hit on it at the end of his remarks. Exposure is key, right? If we want kids to believe that they can, we have to show them others who have. So I think exposure is key. Hands-on. I'm out of the cooperative education experience from Northeastern, so hands-on is just amazing, right? Because you find out what you like and what you don't like, but you're still being exposed. And so I really like that concept. What I will say as an employer that has put various programs in place for young people, because COVID has changed everything, right? And people aren't working with necessarily the money that they had pre-COVID. Be open to free work. What I hear a lot from our kids is, I'm not working for free. Be open to that, right? Because again, it's about exposure, right? And this lab may not be able to afford you as a research assistant, but they'll jump through hoops for you if you say you're willing to work without pay. And then guess what happens when they do get funded? Because they've already trained you to do the work. They're gonna hire you. They're not gonna go out looking for somebody else. So I want our kids to expand their mind. I mean, something Ron said earlier, it can't always be about money, right? It's about elevating your thinking and your experiences. The other thing is, I'm big into self-advocacy. Our kids, as early as we possibly can, we need to teach them to be self-advocates. So I know that people who look like us in STEM are not numerous, but that should not prevent our kids. If you are interested in STEM, you identify as somebody, go look for somebody, right? And reach out to them and ask for help. Ask them to be a mentor, a coach, a guide, right? I don't know any person my age in STEM, and most of my friends are in STEM, that would say no to that, right? Because we might not know about you, but you might know about us. Because look, I'm gonna be on the podcast now. So if you need some help and you think I might be able to help you, you reach out to me. And so those are the three things I would say.
I would like to add to that, the part where you say we sometimes, need to work for free. Actually, that's how I got my first position. Is I volunteered to work in the lab over the summer. And that was my first research experience. And the next semester, I received a check in the mail for two bands. And I was like, yo, where this money come from? But it had my name on the check. So, of course I deposited.
Of course I deposited it.
I was walking down the hall and Dr. Catapine was like, yo, Ronald, come here. So I was like, yo, Dad, what I do now? He was like, did you get a check? And I was like, oh man. I was like, yeah. He was like, oh, you're not in no trouble. Not in any trouble. That's some extra money we had left over from the grant, and we had to spend it. So I was like, whoa, this could be, very rewarding. You know what I'm saying? So kind of kept me going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, I got opportunity to, to get my education paid for at City College with, to be put on a grant. And then from there, a fellowship at Tuskegee. And it all started from me volunteering,
I think that's a better word, Ron. Not free work, volunteering.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And I think as students, young people volunteering your time in order to learn, and then for people who are established, volunteering your time and energy to have an impact. And I think that's something that we need to definitely start considering more. I know that what the Black Panthers did is that one Saturday a month that they would get Black physicians to come and give physicals to whoever wanted to come and get them. And I think that type of mentality is something that we definitely need to bring back. So for those of you who have anything that they want to plug or promote, everyone will get at least like 1 minute if they have something. Like what's going on?
Well, I'm dropping an album in 2 months.
Okay.
Completely no science related whatsoever, but I will be dropping a jazz album in about 2 months. It's called Executables. You can find it on Spotify and Apple Music, and you can look me up at Night Sky Project on Instagram.
Yeah, man, hit me with your information. Like
I will.
Like send me your email link or whatever.
Most certainly. I'll get I'll get both of your emails off of Ashanti.
Mm-hmm.
With me, I'm getting ready to graduate with my PhD hopefully, I don't know where I'm going yet, but I have an interview with the lab at Raygon at Harvard. So hopefully I do okay, and they invite me up there so I can bring, some real brotherhood to
To Harvard.
Cambridge. I love it. Good luck with that. I'll say a special prayer for you, both of you. I'm gonna know somebody famous, and I'm gonna know somebody at Harvard. Look at that. What I would say is, if you're suffering with disease, consider a clinical trial as an option. Educate yourself about it and see if it might be right for you.
So I want to go ahead and say thank you to everyone that was on here. As you said earlier on Tanya, that you were the only Black woman on here, and that was very intentional, because I think a lot of times when we do talk about STEM is that we like to get Black men on, and it's not the accurate representation of what's out there of us as a people. So I want to give a special thank you to you coming on, to Ron, thank you, Kojo, thank you. I know you're in the East Coast, so you were on here pretty early for you. So
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you to everyone. And I hope everyone has enjoyed this conversation. That has been another episode of Tomb Talks with the Pharaoh, and I'll see you guys next week.